Hello, welcome back. My name is Adam. I'm your host. This is video 1 of 3. And in this video, we're going to find out what kind of flight simmer you are. If you've already been in the flight simming community and world for many number of years, you're going to recognize yourself as being in one of 3 different categories. And you're going to find that your setup at home is going to fall into one of these 3 categories. If you're new to flight simulation, if you're just getting in, if you're watching this and thinking, I want to get into flight simulation, then please watch this video because it's going to save you a whole load of money. It's going to save you a lot of problems. You're going to find that you fall into one of 3 categories, and your buying habits or your purchases that you make are going to be dictated by the kind of flight simmer you are. And instead of going out and wasting a load of money on software and hardware that you're not going to need, watch this video and you'll understand how you can save your money and which type of simulator you're going to build for yourself. We're going to talk a little bit as well about the 4 essential elements any flight simulator has, no matter if you are training to be a commercial airliner or if you're literally at home with your mates doing this for a little bit of fun. You're gonna need these 4 essential elements, okay? And we're also going to touch upon about the simulators that are available to you. So what are the 4 essential elements first off? So if you're watching this and you've been in the flight simming world for a number of years, you're gonna have the 4 essential elements already set up without even knowing it. If you're just coming into this for the first time, then you're gonna be required to get these 4 essential elements. And before you rush out and buy them, after we mention what they are, I'm gonna go into detail a little bit about each one, and then we're gonna talk about the 3 categories that you're going to fall into one of these, and you're going to understand that you won't need to buy certain items. So the first essential element to any flight simulator is its display, okay? How you display the flight simulator. Now, it can be as basic as a laptop screen, or it can be as complicated as 4 monitors stitched together, or a projection screen, okay? It goes from one extreme to the other. So it starts off with a laptop, really. That's the most basic form, okay? You can also have your TV at home or your PC monitor being in standard definition or high definition. Your next option, again, is a 4K enabled PC monitor as well. But running it on a PC monitor of some kind with a single display, or even a curved display, or one of them displays which is like anamorphic, it's going to be one of them. That's your second option. Your third option is a projector of some kind, either front or rear, or multiple screens put together. And they are kind of made for home cockpit builds. You know, if you're training and you want to build a full-on, full-sized home cockpit of the 737, then you're probably going to get multiple monitors, put them together, or you're going to have it projected on a wall, either rear or front projection. But you're going to have a display of some kind, okay? The next essential element is your computer. And it can be, again, as basic as a laptop, or it can be as complicated as one that you've built yourself, and it's got all the best pieces in it, okay? And you're going to understand that you're not going to be required to run a $3,000 PC if you're in it just for a few hours of fun on the weekend, okay? You're going to understand how you can maximize and save your money and get the best PC for your needs by the end of this video. So a computer, some sort of hardware system is needed to run a flight simulator, which kind of goes in hand with the third essential element, which is the software, which is what type of software do I run on my PC. And that's the one thing that I need to note here is I've never seen, later on we're going to talk about 4 different types of simulators. I've never seen them run on an Apple or a Mac or an Android machine or a Linux device. It's always been a Windows PC. Okay, if they're available or not on Mac, I really don't know, but I believe it's only run on a Windows PC. You can get flight simulators that do run on Android, do run on Mac and Apple's, okay, computers, but we're not going to be talking about them ones. We're only going to be talking about 4 very specific simulators, okay, which we're going to get to in a minute. So your software is the third essential element, and deciding on which software to get, you'll know by the end of this video. And the final essential element is your control system, okay? Your control system can be as basic as the touchpad on your laptop or a mouse and keyboard, but it can be as complicated as a full simulation setup. Not in the same league as like a Boeing or Airbus simulator, you know, you don't need to go to that great lengths, but you're going to have some type of control system for your simulator. Otherwise, how are you going to fly your plane, okay? But how much money are you going to spend? You're going to find out, okay? So they're your 4 essential elements. Now, once you've defined which category you fall into, you can go out and you can purchase your 4 basic elements. And in the next video, we're going to go through the hardware, the software, and the controller system in a lot more detail. So in this video, we're going to talk about the display in a lot more detail and the types of simulator in a lot more detail. But first, let's find out what kind of simmer you are. So if you've been in this game, or if you've been in this hobby for many years, or you're just starting out, you're definitely going to fall into one of 3 categories, okay? You're either going to become one of 3 different simmers. The first category is purely just for fun. This kind of denotes about 10% of the community, okay? It's a non-serious group of people who do this part-time. They don't have a fancy setup. They probably most likely run it off a laptop. They're not looking to create a home cockpit because they see it as a game, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Somebody, in fact, makes YouTube videos and has millions of views and thousands of subscribers, and they're very enjoyable to watch. And he runs FSX, which is a basic flight simulator, and most likely runs it on a laptop and uses a basic control system. And that's totally fine if you're in it for a bit of fun. If you're in it for a bit more serious and a bit more training, then you probably wouldn't use FSX, which is one of the simulators we're going to talk about in a moment. Because the next category, which probably is about 60% of the community, is in it for training purposes, or they're in it for full time and they want a realistic sim. Now, out of this 60%, right, there's 2 types of people within this training category. You either have a desktop simulator or you have a home cockpit simulator. And I would say out of that 60%, about 25% has a home cockpit setup, which is I'm talking about a full cockpit of a simulator, okay? Aimed at simulating maybe 2 or 3 different types of planes. The rest of this 60% has a desktop simulator, and I fall into that category. My simulator at the moment is just purely on the desktop, okay? I do it full time. I do it like every day. I want a realistic sim, and I've spent a lot of money and a lot of investment of time on it. You know, it's not purely just for fun, although I do enjoy it. I'm using it for training purposes. So if that's you, if you're wanting to either train to become a pilot, or you want to enhance your training as in a career of aviation, then you're going to fall into the training category, okay? And you're going to steer your purchases accordingly. The third category is a very general category, and it's the people who are fans of aviation in general, and they just love to fly, and they don't really care what they fly on or how they fly. They just want to fly a plane. So they'll either do it on a laptop or a custom built PC. They'll probably have all the simulators that we're about to talk about on their computer, or they'll probably even have it on their phone, and they'll just have a little play about, because they just love to fly. And they'll probably buy almost every add-on that comes out, and they'll buy anything. And they'll probably put it on the different simulators they have. They may have a home cockpit, but it's very unlikely because they are very general. And this is about, I would say, 20% of our community. 20-25% of the community. Overall, the majority of people are either in it for fun or in it for training. So from this point on, we're only going to be looking at them two categories. But for me, I believe you either fall into one of three categories, okay? So if you're in it for fun or if you're in it for training, please follow on. There are 4 simulators that are available to you. There are more flight simulators, to be honest. There are many more. But there are 4 major players. Now, I'm going to make an honorable mention straight away, which is one that we're not going to include in our discussions, but one that I feel that should be mentioned because it's getting a lot of momentum at the moment, which is Aerofly 2. It's a very specific flight simulator in that it only replicates a very small portion of America in its simulator, and then you add on bits and pieces, but there's not a lot of support for it. Orbex, which is a developer for software, they support it, but not a lot of other developers do. You can import stuff into it, and it looks fantastic. It really does look great, but it's a very niche market at the moment, and so it's not fully supported by all developers, but more and more developers will be developing for it perhaps in the future. But I would say if you're in it for a bit of fun, then that is one option that you could go for. The other option you could go for if you're in it for just a bit of fun is the original flight simulator called FSX. And it's now available on Steam, so it's called the Steam Edition. So we'll call it FSX Steam Edition from now on. And that is kind of where it all began. It came out in 2006, 2009. It's a very basic simulator in comparison to the other two we're going to talk about. But they kind of got their cues from this one. It encompasses the entire globe, and you can fly multiple aircraft of both heavy airliners and general aviation, and you can run it on a laptop of today's standards. So if you go and buy a laptop in the shops today, you can run it on one of them and just use a keyboard and mouse and just have a bit of fun. I probably wouldn't use it if you were going for training because it's so old. It's very limited. It was made on a 32-bit system, and it's made for a 32-bit system. It can run on a 64-bit system, but you might find through lengthy flights you will suddenly have an out-of-memory error and it'll crash. It's a very old piece of software, but when it was released, it was far advanced. It was even far more advanced than the computers that were available to everybody at the time, which meant not anybody could run it to its maximum benefit. People really had to limit stuff on it. And it's only now today's computers that can really take full maximum benefit of that software. It was really far advanced for its time. It had high definition texturing in it. It had a lot better flight dynamics for all the different aircraft in it, and you could fly to over 24,000 airports in the world. It was the best simulator as of its time, and perhaps for the next 10 years after as well. Maybe up until about 2015, it was still kind of like regarded as the most popular one that most flight simmers used. I would probably say out of the community, about 30 to 40% of the flight simmers still use FSX, and they either use it for training or they use it for fun. For me, my personal opinion is it's pure fun only. It's not a serious flight sim because it's got a lot of limitations, and you can only do so much. And it means, because it's an older flight sim as well, it means your hardware can only be of a certain type, because if you've got a computer with 16 gig of RAM in it, well, guess what? The flight sim software is only going to use 4 of that, and the rest is just going to sit there idle. So no matter how much RAM you put into your machine, it's never going to be able to take maximum advantage of the software because the software is very limited. That's why it's able to run on a laptop with a mouse and keyboard only. And that's why I highly recommend it only for fun. If you're not a serious, flight simmer, if you're looking just for part-time fun, FSX is the way to go. If you're in it for a bit more training and you want to expand your experience and you perhaps want to build up to building your own home cockpit, then I highly recommend the next two, which is either Prepared or X-Plane. And I would highly recommend with just sticking to one of them two only. Like, only stick with prepared if you choose that, and only stick with X-Plane if you choose that. The differences between the two is that prepared is actually a reworked version of FSX that has evolved into its own flight sim state in the 64-bit world. So it takes full advantage of current technology, but it's based off that old model. So it's very popular and intuitive to use, because if you've used FSX, you'll easily use prepared and you'll understand how it works a lot quicker. And it's future-proofed as well. It's 64-bit ready, and it's got 4K texturing. It's got all the benefits of the advanced hardware, and it's got all the luxuries of the past sort of the way we've used it. So it is kind of like the best of both worlds. And it has the majority support for it in the community and from the developers, which is crucial as well. Because if no developer supports a flight simulator, you can only use it to a certain degree and not get its full benefit. Whereas prepared is the most sort of widely used flight simulator. And I would say about 40 to 60% of the community use, or maybe even 60 to 70 use prepared. The rest of the community either use both prepared and our next one we're going to talk about, which is X-Plane, or they exclusively use X-Plane. Now X-Plane came out, it's on its 11th, no, it's on its 12th or 13th rendition now, and it came out about 10 years ago, and it kind of took its cues from Flight Simulator X, but it was reworked. The flight dynamics of the aircraft are a lot more precise. The night lighting is a lot better than prepared. Texturing is about the same. The terms of its looks is about the same. It has less support from developers, although that is building as we move forward to becoming almost as equal to prepared. And some flight simmers will regard that as the more prestigious flight sim, but it's got the less support for it. So it's one that if you choose that one only, you're going to be limited today in what you can choose to add into it, but in the future that may change and become more popular. So it's kind of like an on the fence simulator. It's a very good one. I highly recommend it. And if you're using it for training, you've got a good simulator. You've got the right one, okay? If you're in prepared, you've still got the right one. If you're using it for training, you don't want to use FSX. You either want to use prepared or you want to use X-Plane, because they are designed with current technology and they have the entire world in it, and they are designed for both general aviation and heavy airliners. There is a fourth one, a fourth sort of flight sim community, which is the combat simulators. Now, there are many different types of combat simulators out there. The only real one worthy of noting is called DCS World. It's very limited in the fact that you buy a scenario rather than you buy the world, and then you fly within that scenario and you fight within that scenario. If it is military aircraft you're interested in, but you're wanting to train, I highly recommend prepared, because if you get the professional version, which costs like $200, you get military aircraft and military scenarios in with that package. If you get DCS World, you get a limited world, but you get really high quality visuals. In fact, the visuals probably are better than prepared, because DCS World is a 64-bit sim designed for current technology, whereas prepared is an evolved sim from the past designed for the future. So it's in that state of the middle. But it does, in fact, prepared, it's very much a jack of all trades kind of simulator, which is probably why it's so wildly popular in the community and by developers, because it does do a little bit of everything, whereas X-Plane is specifically aimed at aircraft sort of realism, you know. The way you handle the procedures, I mean, the aircraft in both prepared and X-Plane are exactly the same. You will be clicking the same switches. The cockpit will look exactly the same. It will just handle differently in both platforms. And unless you've got both on your system, unless you're in that third category of I love to fly, you really won't know the difference if you have one or the other. But what I highly recommend is that you choose one or the other if you're looking to make a home cockpit or a training platform. I wouldn't recommend having both, because one thing you'll find when you start to build your computer, your hardware, you're going to want to specifically build it in a way which, if you have multiple software systems on that computer, it's going to lose performance. Whereas if you only have one, you can streamline your hardware for your software and get better performance out of your simulator. Okay, so that's the 4 simulators really really we're only going to be talking about the 3 simulators, FSX, Prepared, and X-Plane. And in fact, I'm kind of going to say X-Plane and Prepared are one in the same. So really, we're going to be talking about FSX and Prepared / X-Plane, okay? And from now on, we're only going to be talking about if you're in it for fun or if you're in it for training, okay? So I think now you kind of get an understanding of what kind of flight simmer you are, or what kind of flight simmer you want to become. You either want to become a very serious, dedicated, I'm going to train to fly the 737 or a particular aircraft, and therefore I'm going to build a home cockpit or have a desktop simulator. Therefore I'm going to need a software that matches that level that of investment that I'm going to put into it. And therefore my display monitor is going to be of a certain type. You know, you're probably going to want 4K monitors or multiple monitors. You're going to want a custom built PC, and you're going to want a full control setup, and you're probably going to want Prepared or X-Plane. And if you're in it for fun, then you're going to want FSX Steam Edition. You're going to either run it off a laptop or just a PC you buy in the shops, which is absolutely fine. And you can either use mouse, keyboard, or you can have a joystick or a yoke. We're going to get into the controllers in the next video in a lot more detail. But you're probably not going to want to build a massive home cockpit. In fact, I would not recommend building a full cockpit and wasting your money on FSX Steam Edition. I would highly recommend you wasting your money on Prepared and X-Plane instead. So that's it for this video, I think. You either fall into one of the 3 categories. You're in the fun, or you're in the training, or you're in the love to fly category. In the next video, we're only going to be looking at the fun or the training category. We're going to be taking Jack and his twin brother Mac as an example. And Jack is going to be buying the fun setup in a part-time, non-serious way. And Mac is going to be training as a commercial pilot. He's going to be investing full-time money and time into it, and he's going to want a realistic sim. And we're going to go through the different setups for each one. Okay, you're going to learn a lot more about the hardware that is your options that are available to you, and the software that is available to you as well. I highly recommend 4K wherever you can. If you don't get 4K and you're asking your simulator to do 1080p, you're actually bottlenecking your simulator if you've got Prepared or X-Plane. If you've got Flight Simulator X Steam Edition, it doesn't really matter, to be honest, because your computer will be powerful enough to run it anyway. But if you've got Prepared or X-Plane and you're running a 1080p TV or monitor, you're actually getting worse performance if your computer has a 4K enabled card in it. The reason is because a lot of the textures, a lot of the models have 4K textures available to it. The other option they give you is HD. Now, their HD is actually 2K. It's not HD. High definition is 1080p, which is one step down from 2K. Some cinemas display their films at 2K, which is one step up above Blu-ray, 1080p. Then you also have 4K, which is twice as good as 2K. I have a 4K TV, and my computer supports 4K. Therefore, I use the 4K textures. Therefore, my computer isn't doing any extra calculations in order to downscale the textures. It's just showing them at their natural default resolution. And I actually get better performance that way. If I was to actually tell my display card of my computer, go down to HD, go down to 1080p, and then I told my TV monitor to show it at 1080p, the computer now has to do extra calculations in order to turn even the 2K textures and rescale them down to 1080p. And therefore it's taken away from the performance. Even if I put in the 4K textures, it's still asking the computer to do these extra calculations to showcase my display at the right resolution, and it's taken away performance. So if you're going to be training, I highly recommend you get 4K monitor or a 4K projector, or if you've got multiple monitors and you can't really afford a multiple 4K setup, because not many computers will actually support 3 4K TVs running on it, then you go for the HD option. If you have 3, 3 or 4 monitors running, okay, and you only use the 2K textures, okay, and you have a really good PC, you know, it'll probably be a PC that supports 4K, but you're only going to ask it to do the 1080p or the 2K, okay, simply because you've got that 2, 3 or 4 monitor setup. If you've only got one monitor, I highly recommend you go in 4K on it, okay, because you're going to maximize your performance on your PC. So it really depends upon yourself of what kind of setup. If you're using a desktop, you don't need multiple monitors. One monitor will do fine. If you're going for a home cockpit build, then you can maximize your performance by getting a projector, which will project either at 4K or 2K, or you can go with multiple monitors, but you will have to go 1080p because your computer might not be able to handle 4K. But I always recommend going 4K where possible. Okay, now one thing before we go is I want to mention money, because let's face it, this is a luxury. Having a flight simulator in your home is a luxury. It's not a necessity. You know, it's not like food or electric or your rent, okay? So a lot of people say, well, I can't afford a full home cockpit build, but I want one. You know, I want a 4K TV, but I just can't afford it. Well, guess what? You've got to prioritize. You've got to decide for yourself what you feel is important. And I want to touch upon personal happiness for a second, because personal happiness should be your priority in anything you do in life. If you're not happy in life, if you're depressed, that can lead to suicide. That can lead to ending your life. You've personally got to be happy in your life, and your partner needs to appreciate that you have your personal happiness and they have their personal happiness, and it might not be the same thing. It'll be great if it is, but it might not be the same thing, and you need to respect each other's personal happiness. Now, my personal happiness is flying, okay? And so therefore I have allowed myself to dedicate some money and some time to making me happy in this way. And you know what? I have a happy life. I don't have a depressing life. I allow myself to be happy because I want to die happy. I don't want to die with regret. I don't want to die miserable. I want to have a fun and happy life. So therefore I allow myself the time and the investment to do what makes me happy. If you save your money over months, if you save a little bit out of your paycheck every month and you save up over a year, you can buy whatever you want. And you've justified that purchase because you've saved that money, and you haven't taken out of your rent, you haven't taken out of your food, and you haven't taken out for your bills, you know? You've saved it as on the side, and you've saved up, and you've bought it yourself. Therefore, your partner should never be going, you're wasting your money and you're spending all of our rent, unless, of course, you are spending the rent, in which case that's a big no-no. But if you save that money, then you have the right to spend it if it makes you happy, because you've earned that money. And you're still paying your bills and your rent, and you're putting food on the table. So therefore, you get a luxury for life as well. And every human is entitled to be happy. You know, no one should be miserable or feel to be made to be feel guilty about doing something that makes them happy.
Oh, shit!
What the fuck? Who in their right mind is going to make their partner feel guilty because they want to be happy? That's crazy talk, that is, to me. My girlfriend, right? I never want to restrict her happiness. If she was happy in collecting dolls, I would never tell her she's wasting her money or that she's, you know, I would allow her. I would say, you know, flourish that because it makes you happy and you'll have a happy life and those around you will be happy and you'll love life. So for me, when people say I can't afford to buy this and that, it generally means because one or two things: they don't earn enough money to be able to buy it outright alongside their rent and their bills and their other commitments, or their partner is making them feel guilty for doing it. Two things: one, just save your money each month until you do have the money, and then you can get the best of everything and not have to say, well, I gotta buy this cheap one because I can only afford that. Well, don't, because it's going to cost you more in the long run. You know, save your money and get the best of everything, because this is flight simulation. This isn't like making a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. This is flight simulation. This is, you want the best of everything because you do want it to look visually great. You do want it to handle and feel as realistic as possible. If you're in it for training purposes, you need to put your time and investment into it. You need to save your money and build it little by little over a long period of time. It's a long-term investment, guys. It ain't no, you know, weekender fun little thing unless you are non-serious, part-time flight simmer and you're for fun, in which case you only need a laptop and you only need to go buy FSX and off you go. And that's not going to cost you the earth because FSX Steam Edition is only 40 quid or maybe even 20 quid now, but a laptop is like 200 quid. So for less than 300 quid, you're off and flying and having fun. But if you want to take it training and you want to take it seriously, save your money, make yourself a cockpit either on your desktop or as a home cockpit build, and spend that money and get the best of everything. Don't you know, go for the lower quality stuff because it ain't gonna feel good. It ain't gonna look good, you know. So anyway, with that said, in the next video we're going to go into more detail about the software, the hardware and the controllers, and we're going to see which one is kind of like the better, or at least you're going to get the options, but we're going to see which one's the better. And I hope in this video you've decided what kind of simmer you are, and that's helped you to understand how you look at this in a bit better. So thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, guys. Bye bye.